is like on course at Addington Raceway. With us is Bella Tawara from the Portfolio Model Agency, who's there now. Bella, how's the party going?
Yes, well, it is fantastic. I think everyone is really enjoying the environment today. Unfortunately, it's not great weather, but we are keeping warm inside at the Lindau lawn.
Now, how big? Because there's about, I think it's sold out, but it's the crowd capacity has been reduced to 12,000. But it's quite it's quite an event for the people of Christchurch. This, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. So it is a massive event for Christchurch, and I think it's definitely the race of the season, that's for sure. And we're all out here celebrating, and it's just a day to really enjoy the races and be with the people that we're close to. And unfortunately, this year has been a bit up and down, so it's nice to get out there and socialise for once.
Yeah, nice. And finally, a big dress-up day. Are people making the effort in the era of COVID to dress up?
Totally. I think people are really supporting local this year. So we're seeing some amazing brands such as your Chalice Cooper and Karen Walker and whatnot, and people are taking the effort to really mix and match with their bright colours and their vintage lace and whatnot. So it's really, really cool to see. And people always put in a fantastic effort, and it's nice to see the colours, and it just really puts a smile on your face, I think. Yeah,
good to have you on, Bella, and have a great rest of the afternoon. That's Bella Tawara from the Portfolio Model Agency, and the big race at 5:34 p.m. there. Placing your bet, Tabor?
I have never placed a bet before. I feel like I'm not a New Zealander because I'm like, I've never been to Cup Day.
Never been to a Cup Day?
12,000 people attend. What?
Gotta go to just one Cup Day, surely.
Sure you do.
I know. I'm next year, guys, 2021.
2021 is the year for Cup Days.
I remember going to the Waiheke Gold Cup many years ago and winning big, about $1,500 in those days. And the person I took the tip from was the guy in the white coat that opens the door to the president's room. I said, who's going to win? He said, this horse. So I put the money on. Because he was the expert, right? Brill cream in the white coat, opening the door. Well, that's the guy, obviously, you talked to. So that's been my racing history, really. Yeah. Brilliant.
People want to get hold of the book there, Phil. And by the way, The Lost Pianos of Siberia. I listened to a most interesting interview with the author about a month ago on Saturday's Kim Hill show.
Okay, there you go.
So I want to get that book. Now, here's a email from Chris. In the 90s, I returned home to a job in New Zealand after 25 years away. It never really worked for me in New Zealand. The issue wasn't that New Zealand had changed. It was me that had changed. My employer and colleagues here did not want the knowledge and experience from elsewhere or the non-Kiwi way of delivering it. In the end, I just succumbed to the New Zealand way and eventually took an early retirement option. It wasn't that anyone was at fault. There's just a different way in this country, and no one has to be prepared to make big changes to their way of doing things when they return home to New Zealand after so long away. I'm happy to be here now in my dotage with the lifestyle of leisure that this country has to offer. So it sounds like a bit of a mixed blessing from Chris coming back to Aotearoa.
Well, that's precisely right. And that's exactly what we need to overcome. And I would say to those people coming back, maybe start your own business. And that's why you need to stay connected offshore.
Tabor Khan, Phil O'Reilly, thank you so much for being on the panel with me this afternoon. I appreciate it. I'm back tomorrow, Wednesday, 3:45 sharp. Till then, bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, the big damp continues in Napier tonight. Some residents say they're lucky to be alive after being forced to evacuate in the 1 in 200 year storm. We could have enough COVID vaccine for 750,000 people by early next year. So who will get priority and what about the rest of us? A dream beyond a dream or a potential nightmare? Shane Reti is appointed Deputy Leader of the National Party. A fair way out of the White House, what Donald Trump's golf game reveals about his attitude to losing. The government's GST take is up 10%, so should more businesses be paying back those wage subsidies? And racing this time in Christchurch. RNZ News at 5, kia ora ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The flood-hit city of Napier is bracing for more rain and the possibility of more people being forced to evacuate their homes. Hundreds of properties in low-lying areas of Onekawa, Maraenui, Pirimai and Marewa are flooded, but it could be another day or more before the full extent of damage is clear. Emergency services are checking on people and assessing the risk to buildings from water and landslips. The city's mayor says it's extremely lucky that no one was killed or injured in what she calls a 1 in 250 year event. Kirsten Wise says an evacuation centre remains open and around 30 people are expected to shelter there tonight. Met Service has a heavy rain watch in place and expects further periods of heavy rain until tomorrow evening, but it says it's not going to be as destructive as last night. Amber MacArthur from the Red Cross Welfare Support Team says they're supporting those forced from their homes in a number of different ways.
We've had a number of requests from, urgent medication through to I just want a toothbrush so I can brush my teeth, and just letting them know that, they're safe and we're here to help, and, let us know if there's anything that they need in the short term to help them.
Amber MacArthur from the Red Cross. Napier resident Dan Simons has described a river of water flowing through the middle of his Bluff Hill home.
The bank came crashing down from next door. We were out there looking out the window, and the bank came crashing down, and it created a dam which just funneled all the water coming down the hill in the front door of the house, through the house and then out the back door of the house.
Napier resident Dan Simons. The Research, Science and Innovation Minister is optimistic following a breakthrough in the development of a COVID-19 vaccine. Early results of a large-scale trial run by American drug company Pfizer show the vaccine appears to be more than 90% effective. New Zealand has signed a deal to buy 1.5 million vaccines, enough for 750,000 people, subject to it passing all clinical trials and being approved by MedSafe. Megan Woods says she's hopeful.
Of course, we do have to finish the clinical trials. They do have to be peer reviewed, and then we have to ensure that this goes through the MedSafe processes in New Zealand.
Megan Woods says New Zealand is one of just a handful of countries that has an advance arrangement with Pfizer for supplies of the vaccine. Judith Collins says the National Party's uncontested leadership positions mark a perfect start to its rebuild. Shane Reti will replace Jerry Brownlee as deputy leader, while Ms Collins was reconfirmed as leader with no challenges. She says the party has gone through a gruelling and difficult campaign.
Dr Shane was with me for much of that, particularly when we were in lockdown here in Wellington. We worked very, very well together, but I think too that caucus has decided that it is really important that everyone be working together.
Judith Collins says some MPs may not get the roles they wanted, but everyone must focus on what needs to be done. Team New Zealand says the Serious Fraud Office has not contacted it regarding an investigation into taxpayer funding for the America's Cup Regatta. The SFO and the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment have confirmed there were discussions between each other, but neither will elaborate. Team New Zealand chairperson Sir Stephen Tindall says he believes there is no need for the SFO to be involved.
There's been no communication from the SFO to us whatsoever, no. For that reason, we believe there's no investigation underway, or we would have been contacted for sure.
It's been almost 3 months since officials found no evidence of wrongdoing or fraud by Team New Zealand or its event organising arm. President Donald Trump's campaign team has filed a lawsuit against the state of Pennsylvania, alleging its mail-in voting system for the US presidential election lacked transparency. It seeks an emergency injunction to stop state officials from certifying Joe Biden's victory there. The president has continued to make allegations of fraud without providing any evidence. 3 people went to hospital in the Hutt Valley with food poisoning after eating whitefish included in a HelloFresh home delivery meal kit. The company has apologised to its customers after a batch of trevally was found to contain elevated levels of histamine, which can cause diarrhoea, rashes and vomiting. HelloFresh is advising customers to avoid eating the fish included in its kits.
It's 4.5 minutes past 5. The All Blacks are hoping prop Ofa Tu'ungafasi will avoid a lengthy suspension when he appears before the judiciary tonight after being sent off in the loss to Australia at the weekend. Both Tu'ungafasi and Wallabies loose forward Lachlan Swinton received red cards for high tackles. Swinton's been suspended for 4 weeks and a similar penalty looms for Tu'ungafasi, although All Blacks assistant coach John Plumtree is hopeful of a different outcome.
There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes around Ofa's case, and just hopefully for us that they'll see some of that and see it positively, and we'll get a good result there. But in these types of circumstances, wouldn't have a clue what's going to happen.
John Plumtree. Copy that as the form horse heading into this afternoon's New Zealand Trotting Cup at Addington. The 4-year-old stallion has won 4 of its 5 races this season and was second in the other. Copy that is 75-year-old trainer Ray Green's first Cup starter, and Green says his form is top drawer.
Oh yeah, it's his best form line in the race for sure. And he's, this last start there, he beat the best horses. He beat the best horses last time, so his form line's super,
The other favourites in the race are the Purdon Rasmussen trained Self Assured and Spankham. The race is scheduled for 5:35. The Argentina football great Diego Maradona is expected to be released from hospital in the next couple of days after suffering a blood clot on the brain last week. That's the news.
Napier hunkers down.
Trees falling, poles, mud everywhere, and then just water just filling it up like a huge pool.
It's a once in 250-year downpour.
Just as though there's a river going down the road. When we were kids, we used to love it when the drain got blocked and we'd play boats. No way am I going out there to play boats.
Overseas, science trumpets a breakthrough.
90% is a game changer.
Sunnier days ahead. Morning report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, including Taumaranui and Taihape. Showers heavy at times, thunderstorms possible tonight, easing later tomorrow. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, periods of rain with heavy falls. Thunderstorms possible tonight and again tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, periods of rain, heavy falls and thunderstorms possible, easing tomorrow night. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast to Wellington and Wairarapa, periods of rain, easing to showers tomorrow morning, then clearing by tomorrow night. Nelson and Marlborough, scattered rain, becoming confined to the colder coast this evening. Partly cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers. Canterbury, mostly cloudy today with isolated showers, fine spells developing tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, also Southland and Otago, fine, apart from some morning cloud about Southland and Otago tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, periods of rain easing to a few showers tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 7.5 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, COVID vaccines could be here by early next year, but who gets them first? And we talk to the White House Chief of Staff that President Donald Trump fired. But first, Napier is being pummeled by more heavy rain this evening, hampering clean-up efforts after a 1 in 200-year event. A number of homes have been evacuated, and some people say they're lucky to have survived. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter, Tom Kitchen.
Today it was clean-up. Yesterday it was disaster zone. There was already a puddle of water in the lounge of Dan and Christina Simon's historic Bluff Hill home yesterday, but it became worse. Mr. Simon says a slip from the bank above their home created more havoc.
The bank came crashing down from next door. We were out there looking out the window, and the bank came crashing down, and it created a dam which just funneled all the water coming down the hill in the front door of the house, through the house and then out the back door of the house.
The couple's first reaction was disbelief.
Yeah, it was a bit surreal, really. It just happened all so fast. And you just stand around, and it was all quite humorous. It was, because there's nothing. It's so out of your hands. You can't block the door. You can't make a dam.
Yeah.
You can't stop it. So we were just kind of, once we got our senses about us, we started trying to get, we turned the power off, got the plugs up out of the ground, and saved our, some of our stuff, saved computers and all that sort of stuff, but photos and things.
Just up the road, the home of Freeman White caved in from the back due to a landslide. He and his family escaped unscathed, but they think it will be the end of their beloved villa. Mr. White, who was at the back of the house clearing drains, thought he was about to die.
It was so close, man. Honestly, it's almost like it played out in slow motion in front of my eyes. I just I turned around and I just saw the whole back of my property just falling in and impacting on the back of my house. And like, to put this into perspective, literally about 30 seconds before, I was actually standing in exactly the area that is now completely full of detritus, trees, rocks, you name it. If I'd been buried underneath that slip, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today.
The low-lying suburbs of Mariua, Onikawa, Piremai and Maraenui are the worst hit, with many streets still submerged in deep water. With nearby schools closed, children were playing in the water or in boats, despite warnings not to because of likely sewage contamination. Lawrence Green was wading through the water in bare feet to help his sister, whose home is severely damaged.
She called me up, and once the water started coming in, it took about 20 minutes and it was knee deep inside the house. Yes, everyone's okay. It's just all the contacts buggered. Yeah.
Mariua resident Dylan Rosser is kayaking through the floodwaters to get supplies for his whānau and others.
Because my baby needs milk powder, so I've got to go get some milk powder for my whānau and go get some kai, bread, milk, all the main essentials. So me and one of my good mates, we're actually going to be going around to all the houses and checking on all the elderly. We're just going to go check to see if they need like any main essentials, and we're just going to go and grab them for them.
Lucan spent last night using his high-riding Land Cruiser to pull 7 vehicles out of deep water to higher ground.
And I was towing a white Commodore out and it started floating, started bobbing out and it hit a tree. There's people tying their cars to the tree so it didn't float away.
Mariua school principal Chris Minell thinks it could be days before his school reopens.
There's no way you can get in or out of the school, just all the streets around it are shut, quite a bit of water in the grounds. Luckily not too much in the buildings, just a few outbuildings damaged, but we've been pretty lucky compared to some of the people who live around here. So
the streets in the CBD were covered with thick silt. Bay Coffee Hub was open for business, with employee Tracy Holman flat out in the midst of cleaning up.
The road outside is just, we can't sit any tables or anything up outside, and we've had a roof collapse in the storeroom. The mud, obviously, I don't know where it's all come from, but there's like 1 inch or 2 of silt all out here, it's not good.
This afternoon, Napier City Council and Hawke's Bay Civil Defence held a joint press conference with Fire and Emergency. Mayor Kirsten Wise says the storm was a 1 in 250 year event, and it's lucky no one was killed or hospitalised. She defended the time it took to declare an emergency.
On Sunday, the Met Service was simply on a watch, and we didn't even get a warning come through about the event until I think it was midday on Monday, and then it was at its heaviest, of course, around that 6 p.m. at night, and I actually declared at 8 o'clock after working through with the CEDM team what that process was about.
Kirsten Wise says about 30 people will need to use the welfare centre at Kennedy Park overnight, and police will be patrolling areas hit by the floods to ensure property is kept safe tonight, and flood-prone areas' streets are safe too.
Well, Tom Kitchen joins us live now. Tom, for starters, where exactly are you?
Kia ora, Lisa. Good evening. I am in the suburb of Mariua, which is quite close to the central city, but it's absolutely, as you can see, absolutely drenched here, and it's raining again now. It started raining about 4:30, and it's quite heavy at this stage.
We appreciate you being out there in this, but for people who are listening and not watching, we should say you got your gumboots on. What kind of level is the water at there, Tom, in that street and where you are?
Let me have a look. It's probably just past my ankles, nearly up to my knees, so it is quite heavy water, quite a lot of a level of water here.
And generally, what is the city looking like? You've had a look around today?
Well, I spent most of the day in the CBD, that's where my office is, and I also spent a lot of time up on the hill. That's where I was, and I came here specifically for this live cross, actually, and it's quite a shock to actually see this. It's quite different from the CBD. There's a lot of silt over in the CBD, but it might be getting a bit worse now because the rain has just reached that extra level.
And what's the Council and Civil Defence saying?
Well, the council have still got their evacuation centre open tonight, so people are still able to go there. Civil Defence say that there is more rain on the go. Well, as you can see, there definitely is more rain on the go, and it could get even heavier, but they're not expecting it to be as bad as it was yesterday.
And what sort of health warnings are there? Because I know you mentioned to us last night that the wastewater has been under a bit of pressure.
Absolutely, it has been. So the District Health Board sent out an alert today and just warning people not to play in the water. You've got to be pretty careful because I understand a few children around the place have been playing in the water today. You've also got to be careful not to eat any food that might have been around the water. And also, if you're in an office and it's flooded, you just got to be careful that you don't go too close to where it is flooded.
Tom, do us a favour. I know Dom is on camera there and he can't hear me, but can you yell out to Dom and just ask him to give us a little bit of a squizzy around the street for the people who are watching us so we can check out what it's like on that particular road?
Absolutely. Dom, would you like to have a bit of a pan around? We want to see what it looks like around here.
Yeah, so the water is up over Tom's ankles there. He's got his gumboots on, but in some parts of that street it's up a bit higher, and we can see it's coming up over the berm for those of you who are listening to us, and right up the other end of the street there looks to be a bit of traffic control in there, warning people. You can't really see the gutters because she's soaking wet there, and a little bit of light rain at the moment there, Tom. Hey, thanks for standing out there in the rain for us, Tom. We'll catch up with you if there are any more developments later in the program. That's Tom Kitchen joining us from that street there in Napier, and it has taken a bit of a pummelling, and as he says, some more rain expected this evening. It is 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And if you were listening to that, Dom, the cameraman, Dom Thomas, has taken some fantastic pictures, so do go online and have a look at some of his video and photographs there. We're keen for your feedback, especially if you're in that area and you've been affected by the heavy rain. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Air New Zealand has been criticised by its own staff for not making masks mandatory for passengers. The country's latest community COVID-19 case was a Defence Force worker who took a domestic flight to Wellington after becoming infected in Auckland. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Director General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, appear to be at odds over whether people should mask up on planes, trains and buses. Nick Trubridge has the story.
The risk is real. There's nothing stopping those unknowingly infected with COVID-19 boarding domestic flights. That's what the country's latest community case did when they caught an Air New Zealand flight from Auckland to Wellington last week. Those sitting near the sick Defence Force worker have been tested and are self-isolating. Their household contacts also told to isolate until the passengers received a negative result. So what's Air New Zealand doing to keep its customers safe? Internal sources tell Checkpoint the answer to that question is not enough. One staff member whose comments have been voiced to protect their identity points specifically to Air New Zealand's leniency on mask use. At level 1, masks aren't required on domestic flights and aren't compulsory on international flights.
Other airlines can manage it. On other airlines, masks are a condition of carriage.
Conditions of carriage include things like wearing footwear while boarding, leaving the employee puzzled face coverings aren't on the list.
So it can be done. And like I said, other airlines are quite happy to mandate mask use.
Checkpoint's Air New Zealand source says both union officials and the airline's health and safety team have raised the issue of passengers not wearing masks.
I really do not know why it hasn't been implemented. There's probably a couple of reasons at play. It doesn't want to come across as heavy-handed to its passengers. It's very image conscious. Also, Air New Zealand has a habit of not being leading anymore. They're more reactive and they'll leave things until the last minute. They'll leave things as long as they can, basically. And that's what we noticed in the early months of the COVID outbreak and when our crew were getting COVID and it was just a bloody mess. We had more than 30 crew catch it, and they're the only ones we know about.
But Air New Zealand says masks are freely available on domestic flights and passengers can wear their own face coverings. In a statement, Chief Medical Officer Dr Ben Johnston says crew must wear masks on flights carrying passengers who haven't undergone managed isolation and quarantine. He says the airline's mask policies reviewed regularly and studies show the risk of transmission between customers or to cabin crew is very low because seats face forward, seatbacks provide a barrier, airflow within the cabin is high and the direction of airflow on board is from ceiling to floor. Dr Johnston says the only question regarding masks in recent months has been by employees about discomfort and skin irritation related to prolonged use. The most recent meeting with senior union reps was on November 6, and Johnston says no representative raised questions about masks. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Director General of Health Dr Ashley Bloomfield appear to be at odds over making masks compulsory on public transport at Level 1. Dr Bloomfield told Checkpoint he's been consistent in his advice that masks should be compulsory.
There is a huge amount of advice I've given the government that they have taken up. At this point, their decision is not to make masks compulsory under Alert Level 1, but they did accept our advice about doing it under Alert Level 2, so that's very much a part of that Alert Level 2 framework. At the moment, I'm continuing to strongly encourage people to use masks on flights and public transport.
But the Prime Minister says she's never received such advice.
I haven't received any written advice on that. It may have been a verbal recommendation to a minister. Again, if he wishes to put that to Cabinet, he is always, of course, free to bring those recommendations through.
Ms Ardern was asked if the defence worker case was reason to consider making masks on public transport, including flights, compulsory at Level 1.
That was a reason for people to always continue to use them. Of course, at Level 1, we do consider the risk level there to be at a different place than we do at the other alert levels, which is why we don't have the order in place. But again, can I be absolutely clear? I wear a mask on a plane. I encourage others to wear masks on a plane. I encourage people to use them on buses, places where you have close contact with people that you don't know. I would absolutely, in those environments, encourage mask use, regardless of whether there is an order to compel you to.
People on the streets of Auckland this morning were keen to see fellow commuters masking up.
I know I'm doing what I need to do for me, and I wear it out in the street as well, especially in Auckland City.
But it's funny, I should have brought one because I felt like I should have when I was on the bus in Auckland today. I thought, maybe it's time to start wearing a mask again. Everyone's got a bit, slack.
Yeah, well, I thought we were supposed to, so that's why I did it. And because I'm a little bit older, I thought it's important on transport, yeah.
I think people should have to wear masks. I don't think it's a hassle and it's good for the greater good.
I think everyone should wear a mask, on flights and stuff.
So while the Prime Minister is hesitant to issue a declaration, it's clear the country's top medical man and some members of the public want masks made mandatory on public transport to stop the spread. For Checkpoint, Nick Trowbridge.
New Zealand could have enough COVID-19 vaccine for 750,000 people by early next year. So who will get it first and what about everybody else? American drug company Pfizer has announced its coronavirus vaccine appears to be more than 90% effective. New Zealand already has a deal with the company to buy 1.5 million doses, enough for 750,000 people, subject to it passing clinical trials and MedSafe's approval. Our medicines watchdog has started reviewing early clinical trial results to help speed up that process. But the government says the vaccine will still have to go through all the usual safety checks before MedSafe makes its final recommendation. Minister for Research, Science and Innovation, Megan Woods, explains who'll get it first.
There's three key groups that will have the immediate access, and they're broadly those at risk of spreading COVID, those at risk of contracting COVID, and those with increased morbidity and mortality associated with COVID. I think one of the really important things, and we've always talked about when we talk about the vaccine strategy, is we've never put all our vaccine eggs in one basket, that our approach has been very strategic, and I think what we're seeing today is actually that approach is paying dividends. We've got very early access to this vaccine, that we've got a number of ways of accessing vaccine. We hope to have another of these advanced purchase agreements announced before the end of this year. And we're also, of course, talking to Pfizer about any possibilities of upping our order.
One of the categories you say will get priority is those at risk of contracting COVID-19. Isn't everyone at risk of contracting COVID-19?
Well, look, we know that there are some cohorts of people that have increased susceptibility. We know people with immune response disorders. We know that there's certain conditions such as diabetes, asthmatics, people that do have increased risk. And I think that's been well understood as we've gone through this pandemic, that there are some people that not only are more susceptible to catching it, but if they do contract it, can be experienced in a much more severe way.
So will MIQ workers get it first, nurses and doctors?
So those at risk of spreading, I think that anyone who is working at the front line I think is a group of people that will be considered. Of course, beside each of these advanced purchase agreements, which is part of the vaccine strategy, of course, very detailed immunisation plans are being put in place for each of the vaccines. So that's the kind of detail that the immunisation plan will go into.
So increased mortality and morbidity are reasons to get to the front of the queue. Māori have very poor outcomes. Will you be prioritising Māori for the vaccine?
Look, I think that we do know that a lot of the comorbidities for COVID sit very heavily within our Māori and Pacifica community. So I think that the inclusion of that category will mean that, there will be a prioritisation of anyone that has those increased those morbidities and mortalities with it. Often they're associated with a number of other non-communicable diseases which have a high prevalence in those.
So you will be giving priority. You will be giving priority to Māori, Minister?
No, what I'm saying is I think that Māori will probably feature quite heavily in that category by the fact that there is a number of comorbidities that lead to higher mortality figures. So anyone who falls within those categories, but certainly considering our Māori and Pacifica populations, has been an important part of the science and technical group that we've put together.
What about ministers and the Prime Minister? Are you going to be at the front of the queue?
Well, there certainly hasn't been any discussion about that, Lisa.
It's a serious question. As so-called essential workers, will you be prioritised?
I have not been involved in any discussions about that.
So who is going to make the final decisions over who gets this vaccine?
The Ministry of Health, as they do with any vaccination plan. They'll put together a vaccination plan, and as I say, that different vaccines will work differently with different cohorts of people. Some will be more, will be a better match for some populations than others, and that's the very detailed work that health professionals, led by the Ministry of Health, will put together.
Can you be more specific, Minister? What do you mean? A committee of who? Who are these people who are going to make what is a really important decision for the entire country? Who are these faceless people?
So the Ministry of Health put together immunisation plans. I can't give you names. I don't have that detail with me. But as we do with any immunisation rollout, that there are people who are expert in this field who understand these things very well. They'll be making the decisions.
Minister, would you undertake to get us those names?
No.
Why not?
I'm failing to understand why you need the names of the people that will be making the decisions around the immunisation strategy. If it's,
It affects 5 million people, and it's an essential decision that people would probably expect some transparency around. So it's not unreasonable, is it, to know who are making these decisions?
The thing that we've always been incredibly transparent about, Lisa, is what the criteria will be. And I think that is the really important thing, that people and New Zealanders understand for each of these vaccines that we access, that people understand what the decision-making criteria will be, how it is that we are doing that allocation. I fail to see how me giving you the name of some health professionals who could get lobbied very heavily will add to the conversation. But what I can give you an absolute undertaking is transparency around the rollout, around the criteria, and all those things that New Zealanders have an absolute right to know about.
So that criteria, the 3 criteria that you listed, are incredibly broad. Is there more detail somewhere?
Oh, absolutely. There'll be more detail that comes through as we progress through the immunisation plan, and we will be releasing that in due course.
And that was the Minister for Research, Science and Innovation, Megan Woods. Despite the pain suffered by plenty of businesses through the COVID pandemic, there's been plenty of spending too. GST paid by businesses to Inland Revenue increased by $1.1 billion for the first 7 months of the year. That's despite hundreds of thousands of businesses receiving billions of dollars in wage subsidies. Nita Blake-Person reports.
While tills may not have been bringing physically, that certainly hasn't stopped Kiwis spending. Figures from Inland Revenue show in the first 7 months of the year, GST payments were up by more than $1 billion, a 10% increase on 2019. Jeff Nightingale is a partner with PwC and a tax expert. He says the numbers show how well New Zealand's economy has fared.
You can see in April a 44% reduction during lockdown of GST receipts, May 11%. But then it came crashing back in June, and I think none of us expected that in March. So it became a timing rather than a permanent difference, which I think is a real sign of the the success, really, of the government's response.
Jill Nort-Young is a professor of accounting at the University of Auckland and has been critical of businesses which have taken the wage subsidy and gone on to pay dividends. He says the wage subsidy was based on a decrease in revenue, but the GST returns show many businesses have had an increase.
Online sales would have increased. People's money that otherwise would have gone into overseas travel has gone into other New Zealand businesses. For example, the do-it-yourself people, they're improving their homes, people spending money in the New Zealand economy. I understand that it's very hard to buy whiteware like washing machines and dishwashers and dryers because people are replacing them. And it's all through the monies that they're not spending by travelling overseas. And so that's a wonderful thing for the country because it's creating economic activity in New Zealand. And that's great. That's great for the economy.
He questions the eligibility criteria for getting the money.
Now, when you look at companies that have increased their cash holdings, well, one wonders whether they did exhaust their cash position before applying for the wage subsidy. We see Fulton Hogan taking the wage subsidy, reporting profits, and then paying dividends to their shareholders. While they may argue that they took the wage subsidy legally, I think morally it's terrible. What a thing to do.
Fulton Hogan has confirmed it's paid back just under $1 million of the more than $34 million it claimed in wage subsidies, but would not answer any questions about how that amount was decided on. It said its intention was to retain the remaining wage subsidy in line with the objective and criteria of the scheme. Kirk Hope of Business New Zealand says people should be careful about calling out specific businesses on the wage subsidy scheme.
By and large, what you saw is pretty good behaviour from businesses in terms of what they did with the subsidy, which is pay it to their employees and ensure that the employees maintained connection to their job, which is what the purpose of the wage subsidy is in the first place.
Jeff Nightingale says the wage subsidy was a generous and urgent scheme which was successful in its purpose to keep people in their jobs. He says people need to be very cautious about attempting to change anything retrospectively.
Some businesses were absolutely ground to zero by lockdown, COVID, border closures. If you think of, airlines and airports, tourism businesses, hospitality businesses and things. And other businesses, of course, experienced a surge in sales. And so the aggregate GST picture doesn't tell the whole story. It's more complicated than that. And within that aggregate GST picture, there will be businesses that no longer exist because they got so badly hurt or are really struggling. And then there are businesses that have been really successful.
The Ministry for Social Development is carrying out random and targeted audits of the more than 750,000 businesses which received wage subsidies. So far, 10,450 checks have taken place, with 867 cases referred for investigation. Kirk Hope says it's too early to tell whether the GST returns indicate more wage subsidies should be returned.
I think it's too hard to tell from a generic set of receipts. I think it really comes down to, the way in which individual businesses are being impacted. And of course, that's what NSD will be looking at as well, to see, whether those businesses were impacted in the way that they thought they might be.
To date, about $500 million of the wage subsidy has been paid back by about 17,000 businesses. The vast majority of those repayments were initiated by the businesses. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blake-Person, Aho.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, a man who knows what it's like to be fired by Trump. The President's former Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, joins us. There's high hopes for the vaccine New Zealand's got dibs on, so who will get it? And the wheels on the electric, environmentally friendly bus go round and round on Waiheke Island. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Get in touch about masks. And also, if you're in Napier, we would love to hear from you if you're in those areas that have been affected by the floodwaters. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time now for the headlines with Susanna.
Napier is bracing for more flooding tonight, with hundreds of homes already evacuated after yesterday's 1 in 250-year deluge. Emergency services are checking on people and assessing the risk to buildings from water and landslips. Met Service has a heavy rain watch in place and expects more heavy rain until tomorrow night, but it says the rain won't be as destructive as last night. The Research, Science and Innovation Minister is confident some New Zealanders will have access to a vaccine against COVID-19 early next year. Early results of a large-scale trial run by American drug company Pfizer show the vaccine appears to be more than 90% effective. Megan Woods says New Zealand is one of just a handful of countries that has an advance arrangement with Pfizer for supplies of the vaccine. Judith Collins says the National Party's uncontested leadership positions mark a perfect start to its rebuild. Shane Reti will replace Jerry Brownlee as deputy leader, while Ms Collins was reconfirmed as leader with no challenges. She says the party has gone through a gruelling and difficult campaign. Team New Zealand says the Serious Fraud Office has not contacted it regarding an investigation into taxpayer funding for the America's Cup Regatta. The SFO and the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment have confirmed there were discussions between each other, but neither will elaborate. Team New Zealand chairperson Sir Stephen Tindall says he believes there is no need for the SFO to be involved. The local share market has ended at a record high but couldn't sustain its opening surge. The benchmark top 50 index opened up more than 2% as it followed Wall Street, which skyrocketed on news of a breakthrough in developing a COVID-19 vaccine. After a strong start, the rally ran out of momentum and the index closed 50 points or 0.4% higher. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time for the business news now with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, so you are telling me that things are looking up for the country's largest construction firm.
Yeah, I think probably best to say looking good in the near term, maybe some headwinds there on the horizon we look through to next year, but we're talking about Fletcher Building here. They've put out quite a positive trading update today for its first 4 months of the financial year, and what it shows is that its operating profit is up by more than a half in the same period last year, but that's not factoring in some significant one-off costs, which we will get a closer look when it puts out its half-year result next year. Its revenue, that was up by a touch. It reflects some strong trading in New Zealand and in Australia, but it was mainly seen in its residential business, with activity there up by about 4%. And this result, if you stand back and look at it, it really does stand in stark contrast to the nearly $200 million loss that this company reported for the previous financial year. So when I spoke to the CEO today, I asked, what have you done differently to really turn around the fortunes for this company? And he's put it down to two things. The first thing he says is that there's been surprising resilience in the construction sector. He's been surprised by it, and he also says it reflects about 2 years' worth of work that the firm has undertaken to really improve efficiencies within its operation. And that's some things as sort of reducing costs, improving margins, that sort of thing. But he does warn there are headwinds ahead, and that's not just with this business, but also in the wider construction sector. He says there is real uncertainty in the second half of the year. That's also due to a lot of uncertainty about the economic outlook, both in New Zealand and in Australia. Things just aren't clear about how they will turn out, and it really does speaks to this headline message that we got from a major survey into the sector today, which found that 81% of respondents saying that their biggest concern in the wake of COVID-19 is uncertainty about the future pipeline of work. A lot of construction firms that we speak to, and Fletcher says the same thing, they have work now, but it's really about what happens next year. But despite all this uncertainty, in response to this update, the company's share price rose by 15% to $5.19 per share. So, look, it seems that investors here are feeling very optimistic about this company's future.
Let's move to the government books. Wow, that's one cracker of a bedtime story. So maybe you could just give us a plot summary.
Yeah. So we've got another piece of economic data suggesting here that doom and gloom that many people were predicting earlier in the year just hasn't played out. Official figures out from Treasury, they show the deficit is at about $3.2 billion for the 3 months ended September. This stands, it's sort of impressive given that in the pre-election forecast they were predicting something in the realm of about a $6.4 billion deficit. Treasury says that the government received an extra $2 billion in tax revenue than it anticipated, and that's because of the huge surge we saw in domestic spending as we came out of lockdown, and also because of the wage subsidy, which both preserve jobs and income tax. So the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, he's come out and said these latest numbers, they're a vindication of how the government has responded to COVID-19. He says it proves that the best economic response is a strong health response. However, the extra borrowing has sent debt levels surging. It's now with net debt rising to an eye-watering $94 billion, which represents about 30.5% of the value of our economy. That does come in just under the 31.7% that was predicted in that pre-election forecast. Obviously, those forecasts we're referring to, came out prior to the election. We are going to get an update next month when Treasury puts out its half-year economic and fiscal update.
So what has been going on the markets today?
Well, as we heard just here in the bulletin, it's been a crazy day in our share market. It started off with an absolute hiss and a roar. That's on the back of these developments about a COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah. So our market opened 200 points up to 12,840. Some of the businesses that really benefited here, this probably says a lot about
travel.
Well, exactly. So Auckland Airport, Air New Zealand, who's been in the news today for a variety of reasons, their share price surged. Tourism Holdings, Millennium Hotels, and surprisingly, on the downside was Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, whose share price took a bit of an early tumble. Over the course of the day, we did see this momentum begin to fizzle out. So the market closed up about 50 points to 12,612. Our dollar gained some more ground. It's at 68.3 US cents, 93.9 Australian and 51.8 British pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with Business. The National Party has elected a new deputy leader to stand behind Judith Collins, and his name is Dr. Shane Reti. The caucus health spokesperson is taking on the new job unopposed as the party begins the process of rebuilding after its devastating election result. Here's our deputy political editor, Craig McCulloch.
He's the man with the prescription to save the opposition. The MP Judith Collins calls Dr. Shane.
Oh, look, I've been called a lot worse before and I'll be called a lot worse in the future. I'm very comfortable with that.
It's not bad, is it, though? I think it's a good one.
Shane Reti has a new moniker now, Deputy Leader of the National Party. He was elected unopposed by the caucus to assume the position. The number 2 spot left vacant by Jerry Brownlee late last week.
Caucus has seen me as a safe pair of hands, as a trusted pair of hands and a hard-working pair of hands. All attributes that Jerry has, of course, as well. But caucus have asked me to step forward into this role today.
We're so lucky to have people like Dr. Shane, working so hard and always with a positive smile on his face, doing the work behind. And actually, I'm really pleased that he's got that job.
Till recently, Dr. Reti has had a low party ranking and low profile, more clinical than theatrical in style. He came into Parliament in 2014 as the MP for Whangarei, having previously worked as a GP and taught at Harvard. But it was this year he made his political mark on the back of COVID-19, elevated to the health portfolio after Michael Woodhouse's fall from favour. He won respect from his colleagues for his reasoned and constructive position on the pandemic, at a time Jerry Brownlee was entertaining more conspiratorial musings.
The issues that the country are going to face over the next couple of years are going to be much more determined by the COVID-19 response, and I think that Shane Reti will provide good support for Judith.
I'm in engine room behind the leader, I'm in engine room beside all of my caucus colleagues.
There was no contest, no other contenders, the caucus confirming both Ms Collins and Dr. Reti as the team to steer the party.
Shane's a top guy and we're lucky to have him in caucus.
Shane's a genuine medical doctor. He's already shown he's got good knowledge around it.
He resonates with New Zealanders, he has a very good command of some important policy areas and he has a respective caucus.
The new leadership duo still has a major task ahead of it, uniting a caucus still reeling from the absolute walloping dealt to National on election night. The final vote count saw the party lose another 3 electorates, including Reti's own Whangarei. Today, they said goodbye to 2 more MPs.
I'm very sad to be going. I love this place.
Yeah, disappointed, but I know I gave it my all. It was a great 3 years.
I believe our caucus has decided that they want to move on, learn the lessons of the past and get on and do the job really, really well. And that's the message I'm giving and getting.
But feelings are still raw. Some put the blame way back at the ousting of Simon Bridges and believe those behind it have yet to pay a price. Ms Collins will unveil her shadow cabinet this week, reshuffling roles among the much smaller team. It's a tricky task at the best of times, but an opportunity too, a chance to appease certain factions and maybe punish others.
I think people will be quite surprised by some of the changes.
The rebuild begins. Shane Reti has a new title now and a whole lot of new challenges too. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Donald Trump's former chief of staff reckons POTUS does not like losing and is unlikely to concede defeat and probably won't turn up to Joe Biden's inauguration. The sitting president has been tweeting up a storm, abruptly terminating his Secretary of Defence, claiming Wisconsin and Georgia are looking good for him and repeating baseless claims of fraud in the Pennsylvania vote count. Mick Mulvaney is the US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, but previously he was Trump's acting White House chief of staff, and he knows exactly what it's like to be fired by the president. I asked Mick Mulvaney what's in Donald Trump's political future.
I think it's mixed in with his business future. Many of us expect the president to go into the television business, to start, for lack of a better word, what we're calling Trump TV, to compete with, say, Fox News. I think the president figured out a long time ago that there's 5 or 6 networks vying over half of our nation that is sort of center-left, and one network vying over everybody is from the center to the right. So I think he's going to do that. I don't know if that takes him out of consideration for 2024. I don't think it does. I think, in fact, he might use that as a way to stay relevant through to 2024 and run again. The president doesn't like losing. He will not like having this, as you put it, hypothetical loss on his resume. And certainly it's very difficult to make the case that you are a great president if you are a one-term president. So I think that the interest that he would have in running in 2024 might be fairly significant. And plus, don't dismiss the fact he would be roughly the same age in 4 years as Joe Biden is now. So it's certainly not out of the question. And one of those wonderful little coffee table discussions right now in the United States of America.
Knowing what you know, though, do you seriously think he'll take another tilt at it?
Well, I think he's certainly capable of doing it. I think he's going to try and figure out where he has more influence and more effect and more power. Is that controlling a media network, a media empire, perhaps 4 years from now? Or is it going back to run for president a second time, keeping in mind that a win 2024 would, in theory, erase a great deal of sort of damage done to that resume if you were to lose this year. So the president doesn't like losing. I think he likes to do other things. He likes to make money, but he really, really doesn't like losing. And I think he likes losing less than he likes making money.
I know you are fond of golf, so I'm assuming you would have played golf with the president at some point.
I have, yes.
So what happens when he does lose?
I never beat him, which is interesting to me. And everybody always asks me if I let him beat me. And I was quick to point out that Donald Trump doesn't hire people that let other people beat them at anything. He doesn't take it very well. I've only seen him get beaten a couple of times. Now, granted, these are with matches with touring pros. We played, I think, at Louis Oosthuizen one time, and Louis shot 62. It's not possible for the president to beat him at that level, but he still didn't like it very much. He is a very, very competitive person. Again, I think that's going to drive whatever he does next.
So, OK, let's stay with the golf example. What happened when he lost? How does that manifest itself?
I made a putt one day to tie him when I was, I think, at the Office of Management and Budget. I was the director at the time. The president and I got to know each other through golf. I was in the cabinet when I was running the budget office, but the president found out I was a single-digit handicap, as he is, so I would go out to play with him from time to time. And I remember one day I made about a 15-footer at the last hole to tie, and I don't think he talked to me for about 2 days after that. So he doesn't. We have the U.S. has a saying that, show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. We don't countenance well to losing in this country, and I'm certain that Donald Trump is the top of the list of people who don't.
When you say he doesn't lose often, is that because he cheats?
No, I got asked that question a lot. Thank you for that question. I got asked that question, and I tell a story. I was playing with him one time at Bedminster, and I'm about an 8 handicap, and he's about a 5. And if you play golf, if you don't play golf, I'm sorry, this anecdote is going to be nothing to you. But if you play golf, you might understand it a little bit. We're on the 16 tee. And I had him even, and I walked up behind him, I slapped him on the back, and I said, all right, old man, I got you today. Today's the day I got you. I'm going to beat you today. And he goes, you don't have a chance. and he finished birdie, par, birdie at the Bedminster Club. By the way, this is the same club that will host the PGA Championship in 2022, I think. It is a real golf course. And I tell people, when you hit it right down the center, 250 yards, as he does every single time when he's playing well, you hit it at 15 feet and make the putt, there's not a lot of opportunity to cheat.
So, given you say he doesn't like losing, and it seems unlikely that he's going to concede anytime soon, who do you think is in his ear in the White House? Who's advising him? Who's in that tight circle right now?
Yeah, but I think what you're seeing right now, and that's the right way to put it, is the tight circle. This is not just the ordinary circle. The ordinary circle would include folks like formerly me in the chief of staff roles, currently Mark Meadows, but I really think that given the intensity of the situation, the gravity of the situation, you've seen that circle sort of tighten down like it was in a crucible, and now it's going to be a very small universe of people. It would be Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, Ivanka, his grown daughter, his two sons, Don Jr. and Eric, his wife, Melania, and then a very, very small group of people who have sort of advised him and been close to him over the course of the 30 years. These would be business people from New York City. Carl Icahn comes to mind, for example. Folks that have known the president since before he was the president and known him well since before he was the president.
When would the last time you have talked to Donald Trump be?
Oh, I talked to the president, I don't know, about a month ago. No, it's not true, because I've been out of the campaign. So I saw him a couple of times out of the campaign. I guess about 3 weeks ago, we were in North Carolina. He did a rally in anticipation of, or in the run-up to the election. I live not too far from there. So we and I got a chance to talk for 10 or 15 minutes beforehand about how the campaign was going. I try not to call him too much, simply because Mark Meadows is a good friend of mine, and I don't think it's institutionally wise for me to sort of continue to keep that constant contact with the president, because people might perceive it as coming at the cost of Mark Meadows, and I wouldn't want to see that. Mark and I are good friends. I talk to Mark more than I talk to the president, which probably makes sense.
Will Donald Trump concede?
Will he concede? Probably not. I could see him giving a speech that says, look, it looks like I lost. I still think I won. I'm going to go quietly and gracefully. But to have the words come out of his mouth that I concede this race to Joe Biden, that's not something that I'd be surprised to see it. Concessions don't mean anything really in our system, other than sort of the appearances of things. They have absolutely zero, and I want to stress that, absolutely zero legal implications. Even if Donald Trump were to or if Joe Biden were to concede tonight, it would not mean anything. He would still be where he is in the polls, not the polls, but in the counting and so forth. But to your original question, it would not surprise me to see the president leave peacefully, quietly and gracefully, but would not be making that phone call that the media will be keeping such a close eye on.
So Donald Trump has several weeks to go in the White House. He's already terminated, as he puts it, the Defence Secretary. I mean, what are you expecting him to do in these final few weeks?
I'm not too concerned about any wholesale, widespread craziness in the West Wing. President and Secretary Esper didn't get along for the last several months, completely within the president's jurisdiction and power to make a replacement. By all accounts, I know of the gentleman who just was named the acting secretary. He ran the National Counterterrorism Center, and I crossed paths with him several times. Completely qualified for the job, so I'm not too concerned there that these late changes have any real impact on our ability, say, to defend ourselves. But there may be a couple other folks who leave. The president said, "Look, you know what? I didn't like the person anyway. They never fit in, and I'd hate to finish this with that person, on the team. Better to maybe in the last couple of days promote somebody who he likes and gives a chance to sort of have a higher office for a couple of weeks to sort of get a taste for it, to see if they might be successful in a future Republican administration." So I'm not too concerned about things getting out of hand, but it would not surprise me if additional personnel changes came before now and the end of the year.
What's it like being sacked by Donald Trump? Does it come as a bolt out of the blue?
I don't know. I got asked that question. I said, Mulvaney, what's it like? You got fired by the president. Like, I don't know. Let's see. I got the job that I wanted to begin with. The president offered me the position of chief of staff when I went into his office to ask to serve as the special envoy to Northern Ireland. He said, no, 6 months, come in, fix the place here. We'll make you chief of staff. After that, you could do Northern Ireland. So I got the job I wanted. I got to help pick my replacement, and my good friend Mark Meadows took that job, and Mark and I have been very close. People forget we were joint founders of the Freedom Caucus together. Our districts touched each other in North and South Carolina. We both had border districts, so we crossed each pass regularly. And I also got lifetime golf privileges at Trump properties around the world. So not a bad deal. So the answer is I don't know what it's like to be fired by Donald Trump, but if that's getting fired, it's not a bad experience at all.
Okay, so do you reckon Donald Trump's going to turn up at Joe Biden's inauguration?
Yeah, no, that goes along with that the expectations I have regarding a concession speech. It would not surprise me if he would not do that for the same reasons I mentioned about the concession speech. That's just not in his. It's not in his nature to sort of throw his hands up and say, "I tried. Good luck to you." You know, that's just not his nature. I think if anything, he might give a speech that says, "Look, this is it. Everybody says I lost. I still think I won, but I get it. I'll leave. You know, I'm going to wish Biden good luck, but don't count me out in 4 years because about 6 months from now, you're going to be wishing I was president." He wasn't. That strikes me as the type of speech that Donald Trump might give out the door, and it's not the type of speech you give if you are going to the inauguration.
So you reckon he won't turn up?
The smart money would be that he doesn't go. I know y'all gamble on this more than we do overseas. I wish we could. It'd be a lot more fun. But the smart money would be on him not showing up for the inauguration.
And Mick, is that not just the ultimate proof that he is a sore loser if he can't turn up at the inauguration?
He doesn't like losing. I mean, you call it a sore loser if you want to, but again, I go back to the bromide here. Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser.
And that was Mick Mulvaney, who is the US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, and he was the former acting White House Chief of Staff. It is 5 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A fleet of electric buses have been rolled out on Waiheke Island, making it the first suburb in Auckland to go electric. The new buses will reduce carbon emissions by over 500 tonnes a year. That's equivalent to the amount of electricity used to power 718 homes. 6 new buses were unveiled today, with 2 more on the way next month. Reporter Louise Tenuth and camera operator Simon Rogers filed this report.
The 6 new buses were unveiled by Auckland Central and Green Party MP Chloe Swarbrick. 12-year-old Libby Ramsey had the honour of cutting the red ribbon as her winning artwork was chosen to decorate one of the buses. Fuller's and Auckland Transport are behind the new venture in a bid for Waiheke to become entirely electric by 2030. The buses can carry up to 37 passengers and rely on charging once a day to cover 300 to 400 kilometres. With vehicles making up 40% of the city's emissions, Mayor Phil Goff was thrilled to be progressing on climate change goals.
It's the goal that we are marking a step towards today of dealing with emissions and having a beautiful, new, clean, emissions-free bus fleet on the island. That's truly something to celebrate.
And not only are they good for the environment, they're quiet too.
Brett was telling me this morning that he was driving the bus and he pulled up at a bus stop and people were reading their papers at the bus stop and the bus was so quiet that he had to tap on the window to say that he was there.
The 9 remaining diesel buses on the island will be replaced as they reach the end of their life. Phil Goff says while electric buses are more expensive, so is the diesel that needs to be shipped over for the old buses.
But the average electric bus would cost about 650,000 as against a diesel bus 350, 400,000. But over the life of the bus, because it's so much cheaper to run, actually it's economic to buy electric buses as well as being good for the environment.
He says his goal is to stop purchasing diesel buses by 2025. Receiving praise from Chloe Swarbrick.
If you did this in 2 years, imagine what you can do in 10. The drive to get Waiheke to be entirely electric by the year 2030. The last stats that I had heard, which I believe was only a few weeks ago when I was speaking to CAF at that point up to date, was that the EV uptake on the island was around 4%. I understand it's now around 6%. So again, if you keep slowly ticking towards that, we will get there in no time at all.
The construction of the buses is a collaboration between one of the world's largest global manufacturers in the UK, ADL, and New Zealand-based energy technology company BYD. CEO of Fuller's, Mike Horn, says the partnership will reap benefits for the economy after COVID-19.
They'll be licensing their buses to be built here in New Zealand, and that will create new jobs and new investment, and this is new technology for New Zealand as well. So it becomes very much a New Zealand Inc. Collaboration. So we're really, really pleased to have ADL in New Zealand.
And with around 70% of Waiheke's visitors from Auckland, they're hoping the new transport is a hit. CEO of Auckland Transport, Shane Allison, says plans are already in place for the next rollout.
Next year we've got more rolling out between Puanui and the airport. It's part of our ongoing journey to go to a low emission bus roadmap by 2040.
He says recent trials over the years have ensured they'll be a success.
Seeing how they operate in different conditions around Auckland, and that's really led us to where we are today. They've gone fantastically well to this point, and it gives us real confidence that these buses are fit for service for Auckland.
It's clear we're fast-tracking to tagging on for a quieter, emission-free ride in the city. For Checkpoint, Louise Tenuth.
And if you were listening to Louise's report, the video will go up on our Facebook page. On masks, you're telling us the DG of Health advocates masks on planes. Why not at big concerts like the Spark Arena? What's the difference?
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. 16 Napier homes are so badly damaged by the weather bomb they are uninhabitable and the occupants have had to be evacuated. The houses are some of the 106 properties inspected by Civil Defence and Emergency Services this afternoon after last night's heavy rainfall. Fire and Emergency Manager Ken Cooper says teams are continuing to move through the affected suburbs and the damage to buildings ranges from minor to severe. As the clean-up continues across the city, Met Service has a heavy rain watch in place and expects further periods of heavy rain until tomorrow evening, but it says it's not going to be as severe as last night. Several streets in Napier CBD are still covered with thick silt from the floods. Bay Coffee Hub is still open for business today, with employee Tracy Holman flat out in the midst of cleaning up.
The road outside is just, we can't set any tables or anything up outside. And we've had a roof collapse in the storeroom. The mud, obviously, I don't know where it's all come from, but there's like an inch or two of silt all out here, it's not good.
Cafe worker Tracy Holman. The Research, Science and Innovation Minister Megan Woods is refusing to name those deciding which New Zealanders will get the first supplies of COVID-19 vaccine. Early results of a large-scale trial run by American drug company Pfizer show the vaccine appears to be more than 90% effective. New Zealand has signed a deal to buy 1.5 million vaccines, enough for 750,000 people, subject to it passing all clinical trials and being approved by MedSafe. The Ministry of Health will decide how a vaccine is rolled out, but Megan Woods told Checkpoint she will not name the decision makers.
I fail to see how me giving you the name of some health professionals who could get lobbied very heavily will add to the conversation.
Megan Woods says there will be transparency about the rollout and criteria. Meanwhile, questions remain about the safety of the potential coronavirus vaccine. A scientist who helped develop the measles vaccine decades ago, Stanley Plotkin, says there are still a lot of unknowns.
We don't know whether the vaccine protects against infection so that individuals who are vaccinated won't be able to excrete the virus and infect other people. We don't know how long the efficacy will last. We don't know whether it protects the elderly as well as the young.
American scientist Stanley Plotkin. The local share market has ended at a record high but couldn't sustain its opening surge. The benchmark top 50 index opened up more than 2% as it followed Wall Street, which skyrocketed on news of a breakthrough in developing a COVID-19 vaccine. After a strong start, the rally ran out of momentum and the index closed 50 points or 0.4% higher. The National Party leader Judith Collins has described how difficult it was to tell staff members they no longer had a job post-election. The funding for the National Leader's office dropped by more than 50% due to the number of electorate seats the party lost. Judith Collins says the sad reality of losing MPs is that staff go as well.
It's never easy, and fortunately I could say that as someone who's been in business over the years and various other positions, I've had to do that for people before, never in those numbers.
Judith Collins was reconfirmed as party leader today with no challenges, and Shane Reti has been appointed as her deputy to replace Jerry Brownlee. A man who stabbed his ex-wife to death in suburban West Auckland has been found guilty of murder. Lee Man-chau attacked Yang Chi-min with a hunting knife on Westgate Drive in Massey in July 2019. It was the Crown's case the 65-year-old murdered his ex-wife, while his defence argued his fragile mental health meant he was guilty of manslaughter. This morning, after 6 hours of deliberations, the jury returned with a guilty verdict, finding Lee had murdered Ms Yang. Donald Trump's former acting chief of staff is predicting the president will return to television once he leaves office. Mr Trump continues to allege that the election process has been rigged against him in states won by the Democratic Party. Mick Mulvaney, who is now the US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, told Checkpoint his former boss probably won't ever concede as he wants to protect his image.
Many of us expect the president to go into the television business, to start, for lack of a better word, what we're calling Trump TV, to compete with, say, Fox News. I think the president figured out a long time ago that there's 5 or 6 networks vying over half of our nation that is sort of center-left, and one network vying over everybody is from the center to the right.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's campaign team has filed a lawsuit against Pennsylvania, alleging the state's mail-in voting system lacked transparency. It's 5 minutes past 6. One of the favourites, Self Assured, has won the New Zealand Trotting Cup in a 1-2-3 for the All-Star stable. Spankham has finished second with Ashley Locas in third. Veteran driver Mark Purdon, who runs the All-Star stable with Natalie Rasmussen, steered Self Assured to victory and says he got a nice run from start to finish.
Yeah, I came off actually Locas's back early and sort of would have been happy to stay in front, but when I saw Spankham, I knew he'd get me to the lane and still be sort of hard to beat too, but I always think he's better coming off a helmet and it worked out great.
Mark Purdon. New Zealand Rugby is standing by its process for selecting a Pasifika team to enter the Super Rugby competition from 2022. Kanaloa Pasifika is taking legal action against New Zealand Rugby, claiming it breached its own rules by agreeing to Moana Pasifika joining the revamped competition when it didn't take part in the formal tender process. The Auckland-based Moana Pasifika bid and a Fiji-based team have been chosen to join the competition from 2022. This will include the 5 New Zealand franchises and 5 from Australia. New Zealand Rugby said in a statement its process was rigorous and fair. The Argentine football great Diego Maradona is expected to be released from hospital in the next couple of days after suffering a blood clot on the brain last week. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the 2020 Lilburn Lecture, named after one of this country's leading classical composers, this year delivered by one of the champions of Kiwi rock on the airwaves, Karen Hay. We've got a window on the Red Prawn War, it's a Mediterranean fishing dispute, and Patrick Phelps on the future of mining on the west coast and how that region might earn its dosh without it. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, Taumaranui and Taihape. Showers heavy at times, thunderstorms possible tonight, easing later tomorrow. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, periods of rain with heavy falls. Thunderstorms possible tonight and again tomorrow afternoon. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, periods of rain with heavy falls and thunderstorms possible, easing tomorrow night. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast to Wellington and Wairarapa, periods of rain, easing to showers tomorrow morning, then clearing by tomorrow night. Nelson and Marlborough, scattered rain becoming confined to the Kaikoura coast tonight, partly cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers. Canterbury, mostly cloudy tonight with isolated showers, fine spells developing tomorrow. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, also Southland and Otago, fine weather, apart from some morning cloud about Southland and Otago tomorrow. Chatham Islands, periods of rain easing to a few showers tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Napier residents are being warned to take care in potentially contaminated floodwaters as the city moves to mop up after a 1 in 250 year flood that swamped the city's wastewater system. It's still raining there and more heavy showers are expected this evening, hampering the clean-up. A number of homes have been evacuated and some say they are lucky to have survived. The newly appointed Minister for Emergency Services, Kitty Allen, arrived in Napier a short time ago. And she joins me now. Good evening, Minister. I know you haven't been there long, but what have you been able to see so far?
Yeah, good evening, Lisa. Look, this evening we have managed to go out to Bluff Hill, which is where a number of the families who have been impacted over the past 24 hours, where some of those homes are. We've had discussions with the residents there about what they saw and participated, I guess, and saw there have been some substantial slips. There is a lot of sludge and the like. Some homes you can see have been really impacted. So I guess if I can just acknowledge those families that have been through quite a period of strife over the past 24 hours, and also to acknowledge the response teams that have been working actively on the ground over the past 24 hours. There has been an incredible response, and here at the Regional Control Centre at the moment, we've had the opportunity to talk with those that have been in charge with the response over the past 24 hours. They are saying there are still issues emerging as they've spent the day on the ground to try and get a fuller or a more fulsome understanding of what the issues are. But of course that will be ongoing to an extent. But look, the situation as we have it at the moment, there are about 15 families that are out of their home. There are about 700 homes this evening that are going into a second evening without power. And there are a small number of homes that have been disconnected from their sewage systems and are utilising Portaloo type facilities this evening. So look, the team here have been doing an incredible job on the ground to work alongside those that have been impacted. My colleagues and I will take the evening to continue to be briefed, go out into some of those communities that have been impacted, and will continue to be briefed here overnight. There is still some expectation that there might be further rainfall this evening, so the team will be monitoring the impacts of that rainfall overnight and keeping us briefed as well.
Minister, you mentioned there the people who are out of their homes, about 16, I think it is, that emergency services have said, 16 households. Where are they tonight?
Yeah, so tonight there are in temporary accommodation at a motor lodge that has been set up here. As well, the Napier City Council has another 3 marae on standby if there are further families that need assistance. And that's a message that we really want to get through very clearly to the residents of Napier, Lisa, is that if there have been anybody impacted and you do need assistance, there has been an 0800 number stood up to assist people, and please don't be hesitant to contact. The number is 0800 422 923. Now, there is a team that is on hand to answer any questions, and if you need to relocate or get into temporary accommodation, the team behind us here are there to assist and to serve you.
So what can you do to help, and are you going to be offering any financial assistance to the region?
In the first instance, we are here to really listen to what those needs are. As I said, look, we'll be meeting with the Mayor and other key stakeholders, the iwi, the tai whenua that have been engaged in the response, and perhaps some of the residents. And so, look, we're going to take a bit of a monitoring role to assess what the needs really are. And the government is here to provide assistance, but what that assistance will be determined as the needs become clearer over the course of the next period or so.
We've seen in other regions where they've had, for example, fires, etc., the government has kicked into the mayoral fund. Is that something that you're looking at? Can you...
Yeah, look, all of those options are on the table, Lisa, and at this stage we do want to make sure that if we're going to provide any assistance, that we're providing it to for the right areas, and that's what that assessment over tonight and over the next couple of days will enable us to do, so that we provide the right resource.
I know we're being told this is a 1 in 250 year event, but we seem to be getting more of these big events that are supposed to occur once in a blue moon. They're becoming more regular. So this is the big question. I mean, how do we deal with this, and who's going to keep picking up the bill?
Yeah, look, I mean, those are incredibly substantive questions that I think a number of stakeholders, such as NEMA and a number of agencies are really looking at. And look, that's been a big part of the reviews that have gone on, for example, within our own organisation, to make sure that we've got a greater strategic overview of what types of events are happening where and how the responses are coming together. Look, so that's something that we're going to have to work through. Right now, obviously, we're focused on the short-term impacts and how we can provide support to the families, but I have no doubt that in due course, those bigger issues that you are asking about will become quite key in the way that we plan for future national emergencies.
Minister, on a much lighter note, I see they've issued you with your emergency services jacket there. I'm hoping that you don't actually get to wear it on many occasions.
Well, I'll tell you something, Lisa, it's my 4th day in the job, and this jacket isn't mine. I borrowed it from somebody, so thank you to whoever lended it to me. Apparently, I've got one in the mail coming, but they shoved this to me on the plane here, so
it's a loaner. All right, all the best, Minister. Thanks for joining us this evening. That is the Minister for Emergency Services, Kitty Allen, who is in Napier surveying the scene. As she mentioned, there are about 16 homes that have been declared uninhabitable, and obviously an evacuation centre has been set up and a hotline number, which we will put up on our Facebook page. National's new deputy, Dr. Shane Reti, says he answers to his dream leader, Judith Collins, but will be consulted on key strategy and the soon-to-be-announced portfolio reshuffle. Jerry Brownlee resigned from the deputy's job following National's thrashing at the election, and the party is waiting on an internal review into what went wrong. Judith Collins was confirmed as party leader at National's caucus meeting today, and Shane Reti, who lost his Whangarei electorate seat, was appointed her deputy, uncontested. Dr. Shane Reti, deputy leader of the National Party. How does that sound to you?
Oh, Lisa, that's a privilege and a dream beyond which I thought I could dream, but today I've been really honoured to have the support of my colleagues and asked to step up to this role.
Why did you think it was a dream beyond what you could dream?
You know, my first task is to be the best MP that I possibly can be for Whangarei. Anything beyond that is a dream.
Is this you excited?
This is me excited.
You mentioned today that you consider Judith Collins to be the dream leader. Tell us, the 2 things that you like most about Judith Collins.
Oh, Judith is very straight. You'll never die wondering what Judith is thinking. And I found her to be very honest in my dealings with Judith. We've had this over a number of years, and I think that's what caucus could see as well. We have a working relationship that is well-founded, well-grounded, and we can work together as an excellent team. And I think that was very appealing to caucus.
So how do you see that relationship working? Are you partners? Is she your boss? Will you get consulted on the big decisions? Practically, how's it going to work?
Judith's my boss. I answer to Judith Collins as the leader, as we all do. And then between us as a partnership and as a collaboration, we'll be setting big strategy in collaboration with caucus, setting party direction, setting out how we might get back the Treasury benches in 2023.
So she's considering reshuffling the portfolios at the moment. Are you going to be involved in that? Is she consulting you about those decisions?
Up until 5 minutes ago, I was doing exactly that. And as soon as I'm finished here, I'll be going back to do exactly that again.
All right, so what do you think is the direction that the National Party should be headed in?
So we're going to be guided by that from our internal review, and that will help us shape and redevelop our relevance and credibility out in the community, which it would seem to be has been a consequence of this recent election result.
So what do you reckon went wrong?
Oh, I think our internal review will point that out, so I'm not going to preempt that. There were internal factors, that's what we're looking at, and external factors.
You must have some
ideas. Yes, I do, and we'll put them all together through the correct process and filter them out and figure out how we make them better.
At a time when the country perhaps needed unity, at a time of crisis, do you think that the tone of the National Party was slightly off?
I think there are many examples where our tone was maybe right on. We were really encouraging of closing the borders when it was appropriate, and we've always tried to collaborate as best we can in our position as opposition to critique the government. And then, of course, our wish is to critique and then to collaborate to raise our collective bar. That's how I frame it. So I think there are examples of where we've actually done quite well, and we have met the need to lift our collective bar.
But when you get an absolute butt kicking, you're not looking at what you got right, you're looking at what you got wrong. So were there times that you got the tone wrong?
Look, I think there could always be times we've got the tone wrong, and there may be times coming forward in the future, and we're going to try our very best to mitigate that. So looking backwards, maybe there are things that we would do differently. That's what we're looking at here now.
Which things are you thinking, Shane, and which examples where you got the tone wrong?
Well, whether the tone was right is the view of the people, and it's for them to really say, look, we think this tone was wrong, and what the community has said is really that definition of whether the tone was right or wrong. We may have one view, we projected it on the day. It's whether New Zealanders feel that, that was the right tone, or maybe it wasn't.
So, well, you, for example, you lost an enormous majority in Whangarei. What went wrong for you?
I think that same mix maybe for us across all of the party, those external and internal factors. The external factors that we couldn't control, that red surge across the country, and then some of our internal factors that we're looking at as well. That affected me in Whangarei, just like it has many of my colleagues, many of my very good colleagues who unfortunately won't be coming back. I'm privileged to be able to do that. So I think it's that mix of things that affected all MPs across the country, affected me as well.
What do you mean by internal factors? Because you really are sounding like a politician right now. What do you mean when you say internal factors affected the loss of your majority? You had an 11,000 majority and it disappeared. Why?
No, I was victor on the night, and then with special votes, I was 500 votes behind.
No, but previously, the last election, you won that seat by about 11,000 votes. So that huge majority that you'd previously been the benefactor of disappeared into the ether. So, yeah, there might have been a couple of hundred votes in it in 2020, but that majority dissolved. So what went catastrophically wrong for you in that electorate?
So your question was around some of the internal things, and there are times that I think we've acknowledged, and the leaders have acknowledged, that maybe we shot ourselves in the foot with some of the things we said or some of the things we did, and this of course is what the internal review is looking at, and that had an impact on my electorate as well, just like it did with other electorates.
So is Jerry Brownlee the sacrificial lamb for the internal failings of the National Party?
No, not at all. Jerry, of his own volition, relinquished the deputy leadership role.
Does losing your seat mean that you're going to have more time to dedicate to this role as deputy leader?
Oh, that's interesting. Look, my observation in the first couple of days is that the needs of the people of Whangarei are unchanged. I'm still receiving many constituent inquiries, and it's been my privilege to continue to work, of course, with the people of Whangarei. So I can't tell here at this point in time. It depends how much of that constituency resources required of me. So it's uncertain at this point.
And that is Dr. Shane Reti, the newly minted Deputy Leader of the National Party. It is 21 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Health experts and politicians around the world are welcoming news a coronavirus vaccine appears to be more than 90% effective. The vaccine was developed in America and Germany by Pfizer and BioNTech. There are still questions about its safety, but the two companies are saying they'll be able to supply 50 million doses by the end of this year and 1.3 billion by the end of next year. The BBC's John Donaldson has more.
Could this be the moment the world has been waiting for? An effective vaccine against COVID-19. It's been developed by the US drugs company Pfizer and a German manufacturer, BioNTech. They say preliminary late-stage trials say it's 90% effective. The CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, called it a great day for science and humanity and a significant step forward in the battle against the pandemic. The UK government has already ordered 30 million doses of the vaccine, but Pfizer says it still has to apply for emergency licensing so that it can be given to the general public outside of trials.
Well, certainly any promising news about a vaccine is great news. And I'm very pleased to hear that there is a vaccine candidate that seems to be going through the phase 3 trial process. And according to what we've read today, the results are looking good.
This could be a major game changer around the world in our response to COVID-19. However, we really have to be careful about safety and scale around the vaccine. So whilst we can go with confidence, I don't think we're seeing any return to normal by Christmas or the new year, as everyone would, I'm sure, hope.
President Trump tweeted his reaction, calling it great news. Stock market up big, he said. And with COVID-19 infection rates soaring, a vaccine cannot come too soon.
The BBC's John Donnison there. Now, the US President-elect Joe Biden is moving quickly in response to the pandemic, but several Republicans continue to claim the race isn't over. Among them, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. CNN's Jeff Zeleny filed this report.
A mask is not a political statement, but it is a good way to start pulling the country together.
President-elect Joe Biden setting a new tone tonight on coronavirus, making clear it will be the top priority of his new administration.
I won't be president until January 20th, but my message today is to everyone is this: it doesn't matter who you voted for. We can save tens of thousands of lives if everyone would just wear a mask for the next few months. Not Democrat or Republican lives, American lives.
Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris moving swiftly in their transition to power, announcing a coronavirus advisory board as the U.S. surpasses 10 million cases. Despite promising news about a vaccine, Biden delivering a grim warning.
We're still facing a very dark winter.
The 13-member board is led by 3 co-chairs, including Dr. Vivek Murthy, a Surgeon General from the Obama administration. It also involves some of the nation's top experts, including Dr. Rick Bright, a former Trump administration vaccine scientist and whistleblower who accused the White House of interfering in efforts to fight the virus. It's a fresh start, even as President Trump has yet to concede political reality and the outcome of the election.
Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now.
Words of congratulations pouring in from around the world, including a call today from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But silence or defiance from most Republicans, with the notable exception of former President George W. Bush, who called Biden and Harris over the weekend and made clear the results should be accepted, saying, "The American people can have confidence that this election was fundamentally fair. Its integrity will be upheld and its outcome is clear."
That report from CNN. Christchurch's big day at the races has gone smoothly this year, with a smaller crowd gathering for its annual Cup Day. The New Zealand Trotting Cup is the biggest event on the harness racing calendar and a major social event in the Garden City. And the big race, which took place just after 5:30 this afternoon, was emphatically won by Self Assured, trained by Mark Purdon and Natalie Rasmussen. This year, the crowd numbers at the Addington Raceway were reined in due to COVID-19 and also appears to have resulted in less horsing around. Our reporter Anand Zaki and cameraman Nate McKinnon went along to soak up the atmosphere.
Despite the looming threat of rain, these punters made the most of Cup Day at the Addington Raceway. 12,000 tickets were sold, which is 30% less than previous years. The limit was imposed due to COVID-19. Annalise Graham drove all the way from Kaikoura with her family for the races and had her sights set on one thing.
Watching the horses race, yeah.
Not the booze?
Yeah, a little bit, but mostly the horses.
Her family normally visit Christchurch for the annual A&P show, which is held in the same week. But that event was cancelled this year due to COVID. After a year full of cancelled parties, today has been a chance for many to flaunt some glamour. Louisa Ndolo was among those dressing to impress.
No, that's my first time. I was so nervous, but it's okay. I did it.
The TAB says more than $2.5 million worth of bets were placed by around 3:30 this afternoon. And the odds-on favourite for the $540,000 New Zealand Trotting Cup are for Copy That, trained by Ray Green. But not everyone is taking it too seriously. Mike Willits, dressed as Mr. Incredible, and David Garters, dressed as the Riddler, says it is all about having a fun day and nothing too serious. Mr. Willits has been coming to the New Zealand Trotting Cup Day for nearly 2 decades.
Dave's been doing it for 5 years now, and I've been doing it for about 17, 19 years. Just something different every year, because instead of the la-di-da stuff, we'd even from a bumblebee to superheroes, just have a good fun day. We've got our bets on, we do it the night before, and just have a fun day.
Kevin Hill and his son Simon were also brightly dressed in blue checkered suits made by Simon's nana.
Pretty sharp, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you know, like we're matching. We woke up this morning, thought we want to look the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Our mother actually, she looked at the curtains this morning. She didn't tell me she was going to use the left one for his suit and the right one for my suit. So it was pretty bad that we actually ended up in the same suit. I thought you would at least go to the bedroom and use the red tartan for Simon.
Simon Hill said he was hoping to wear something similar to the Melbourne Cup, but those plans didn't go ahead due to COVID. Despite the dapper outfits, the duo didn't have intentions to compete for a best dressed.
No. We don't want to take over the competition. We'd like to leave others to have a go.
Yeah.
We're all about participation here.
Yeah. Besides, everyone's going like, oh, I've seen that suit before. And it's like, because he get it on. Yeah. He said, but then there's a better looking guy out there apparently with the same suit.
I don't think they go that far.
Me?
I don't think they go that far.
But all the fun aside, Christchurch man Jody Mills said today is a good day for Canterbury, although he said it has been a bit quiet this year.
Yeah, definitely. I do see a few more empty seats than what I'd usually see. But hey, look, there's people out, there's people about, and I guess people, starting to embellish what we can in the current situation.
The police certainly agree. Senior Sergeant Phil Newton said there was one arrest this afternoon.
What we have found is that quite a few of our punters have turned up. They've already been drinking. They've been turned away at the gates, and we've had 120 through the recovery area. So there's a tent out the front of the event. They get a bit of water, they get themselves up together, and they've been allowed in after that. Senior Sergeant Phil Newton said the good behaviour is down to the smaller crowds. He hopes for more of the same behaviour next year. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Anand Zaki.
If you were listening to that, do please go and watch it online. There are some wonderful outfits and some even better mullets to behold. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Emergency services mark 16 Napier homes as so damaged by last night's deluge they are uninhabitable. The Research, Science and Innovation Minister, Megan Woods, won't say how the first recipients of a new vaccine against COVID-19 will be